If you make around $5,000 a month and still can't save money, if you work hard every day and somehow feel like wealth keeps getting farther away, if you still believe being broke is only about not earning enough, then Rich Dad, Poor Dad might completely change the way you understand money. One of the most uncomfortable truths in that book is this: a lot of people are not bad at earning money. They've just never learned the rules of the money game. When Robert Kiyosaki was a kid, he says he had two fathers. One was his biological father, the poor dad in the book. Poor Dad was well-educated, had a stable job, believed in school, believed in credentials, believed that if you studied hard, got a secure job, saved carefully, and stayed responsible, life would eventually work out. The other was the father of his best friend, the Rich Dad. Rich Dad didn't have the same formal education, but he understood business. More importantly, he understood something most people never get taught: how to make money work for you instead of spending your whole life working for money. And those two fathers didn't just represent two men. They represented two completely different operating systems for life. Poor Dad would say, "I can't afford it." Rich Dad would say, "How can I afford it?" Poor Dad said money causes problems. Rich Dad believed lack of money causes many of the problems people spend their lives trying to escape. Poor Dad wanted his kids to study hard and get a secure job. Rich Dad wanted his kids to understand money, manage money, and build assets. Now at this point, some people assume this is just another book about getting rich fast, buying stocks, starting a business, or finding some secret investment strategy. But if you really pay attention, that's not the deepest lesson in the book. The real question is much more foundational. Are you working for money, or is money working for you? That sounds simple, but that one question can expose your entire financial life. Because for most people, the life script is almost identical. As kids, we're told to do well in school, then get into college or learn a trade, then get a good job, then earn a paycheck, then buy a car, rent a nicer apartment, maybe buy a house, get married, raise kids, work harder, ask for a raise, upgrade your life, and keep going. And from the outside, it looks like progress. But sometimes it's not progress. Sometimes it's just a more expensive version of the same trap. The book calls it the rat race. And that image is brutal because it's accurate. Think of a hamster running on a wheel. The wheel spins fast, the hamster works hard, but it never actually gets anywhere. That's what happens to a lot of people financially. The harder they work, the more obligations they take on. The more they earn, the more their lifestyle expands. The more they need stability, the less risk they can tolerate. The more afraid they become of losing income, the more tightly they attach their survival to a paycheck. And before they realize it, they're no longer building a life. They're maintaining a machine that requires their time, their energy, their stress, and their best years just to keep moving. That's the first core lesson of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Your real financial problem usually isn't low income. It's the absence of assets. And that's where the book hits people with a definition that sounds simple but changes everything. What is an asset? Most people think a house is an asset, a car is an asset, a luxury watch is an asset, a designer bag is an asset, a brand new laptop is an asset. But Rich Dad gives a much more useful definition. If it puts money into your pocket, it's an asset. If it takes money out of your pocket, it's a liability. That one distinction is where a lot of people realize they've been calling expensive obligations wealth. Take a house. If you own a rental property that produces positive cash flow every month after the mortgage, maintenance, taxes, and repairs, that can function like an asset. But if you buy a house that stretches your budget, ties you to a 30-year mortgage, leaves you house poor, and creates constant outflows with no income attached, then emotionally it may feel like success, but financially it may behave more like a liability. Same with a car. A car might make your life easier. It might help you commute. It might even be necessary depending on where you live. But the moment you buy it, it usually starts losing value. Then come the car payment, insurance, gas, maintenance, registration, and repairs. It may improve your comfort, but it does not automatically increase your wealth. And this is where regular people get confused. We assume owning more things means becoming richer. But Rich Dad's point is that true wealth is not about how much stuff you can show people. It's about how many systems you own that keep producing value, whether you're actively working or not. That is a radically different way to think. Because once you see money that way, you stop asking, what can I buy? And you start asking, what can I own that pays me? That's why one of the most famous lines in the book is this: the rich buy assets. The poor only have expenses. The middle class buy liabilities they think are assets. That line hurts because there's truth in it. A low-income household gets a paycheck and immediately uses it for survival. Rent, groceries, utilities, gas, childcare, insurance. The money comes in and goes right back out. A middle-class household may earn much more, but often the same pattern remains. Only now the apartment becomes a larger mortgage. The used car becomes a luxury SUV. The modest vacation becomes financed travel. The phone gets upgraded every year. The furniture is financed. The kitchen remodel goes on a credit card. The lifestyle rises. But so do the fixed monthly obligations. And once that happens, the person may look more successful from the outside while becoming more fragile on the inside. That's the twist most people miss. Higher income does not automatically create security. Sometimes it just creates more expensive stress. The rich, according to the book, do something different. They prioritize buying or building income-producing assets first. That could be a business. It could be index funds. It could be dividend-paying investments. It could be rental property that actually cash flows. It could be intellectual property, equity ownership, royalties, or systems that earn without requiring constant labor. Then, ideally, the income from those assets pays for their lifestyle. That's a completely different logic. A regular person often buys a car with wages. A financially intelligent person tries to buy a car with cash flow generated by assets. Same purchase. Completely different foundation. And let's be honest, this is where the book starts to make people uncomfortable. Because the painful part is not hearing that some people are rich. The painful part is realizing that many of our normal, socially accepted decisions are the exact decisions keeping us financially stuck. But here's where the book is often misunderstood. A lot of readers finish Rich Dad, Poor Dad and come away with the wrong conclusion. They think Poor Dad was a fool and Rich Dad was right about everything. They start acting like education doesn't matter, jobs don't matter, stability doesn't matter, and working for someone else is automatically failure. That is one of the biggest misreadings of the book. Poor Dad was not worthless. He represented discipline, responsibility, education, structure, commitment, and security. Those things matter. For many people, a stable paycheck is what keeps food on the table, health insurance active, bills paid, and life functioning. Without some level of stability, a lot of people never even get the breathing room to invest, learn, or take calculated risks. So the real lesson is not quit your job. The real lesson is not school is useless. The real lesson is not everybody should become an entrepreneur tomorrow. What Rich Dad challenges is not work itself, but dependence on one single source of income. He doesn't attack learning. He attacks the idea that school alone teaches everything you need to know about money. He doesn't attack stability. He attacks turning stability into a cage. That's the deeper reversal in the book. The issue is not whether you have a job. The issue is whether your job is your entire financial identity. Your paycheck can be the starting point. It just shouldn't be the finish line. You can have a career, but you can't only have a career. You can want stability. But you can't use stability as an excuse to avoid learning. You can work hard to earn money. But you also need to learn how to keep money, direct money, multiply money, and protect money. And that leads to the second major lesson of the book. Financial intelligence matters more than income. You've probably seen this play out in real life. Some people make six figures and are still broke. Their salary is high, but so are their payments, subscriptions, impulse purchases, debt obligations, and lifestyle upgrades. They earn more, but they also leak more. Every raise disappears. Every bonus gets pre-spent. Every promotion becomes permission to consume at a higher level. Then there are people with more average incomes who quietly build wealth over time. Not because they're lucky, not because they make headlines, but because they understand the difference between assets and liabilities. They control spending. They avoid unnecessary lifestyle inflation. They invest consistently. They ask better questions. They think long-term. They know that keeping and allocating money is a different skill from earning it. That's also why some lottery winners end up broke a few years later, and why some people lose everything in a downturn and still rebuild. Money itself is not the answer. The ability to manage money is the answer. Without that ability, more money usually just amplifies your existing habits. If you're disciplined, more money helps. If you're reckless, more money scales the recklessness. If you're insecure, more money often creates bigger, shinier ways to express the insecurity. That's why this book isn't really about wealth in the glamorous sense. It's about behavior. It's about mindset. It's about pattern recognition. And maybe most importantly, it's about noticing that the financial life most people call normal is often built on automatic habits they never consciously chose. Rich Dad also emphasizes another idea that gets overlooked. Don't work only for money. Work to learn. That doesn't mean you should accept being underpaid forever in the name of experience. It means when you evaluate a job, you shouldn't only ask, how much does it pay me this year? You should also ask, what skills does it build in me that increase my value for the next 10 years? Maybe a job teaches sales. Maybe it teaches communication. Maybe it teaches negotiation, leadership, operations, marketing, investing, financial analysis, systems thinking, or how businesses actually make money. Those skills can become part of your personal asset base, because the most dangerous job is not necessarily the low-paying one. Sometimes it's the comfortable one that gives you money today but makes you easy to replace tomorrow. That's a hard truth. A job can feed you while quietly shrinking your future options if it never forces you to grow. So financially smart, people don't just ask, what will this job pay? They ask, who will this job turn me into? That question changes careers. That question changes trajectories. That question can stop you from spending 10 years optimizing for comfort while accidentally making yourself more vulnerable. And then the book goes even deeper. According to Rich Dad, some of the biggest enemies in your financial life are not inflation, the stock market, your boss, or the economy. They are fear and desire. Fear makes people freeze. Fear of losing money. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of looking stupid. Fear of being judged. Fear of trying something new and failing publicly. So instead of learning, they avoid. Instead of acting carefully, they do nothing. Instead of building, they wait. But desire creates the other half of the trap. You get a raise and suddenly you want the nicer apartment, the upgraded car, the premium vacations, the new phone, the expensive nights out, the image of success. And now your money is gone before it had a chance to become freedom. That creates a vicious loop. You're afraid of not having enough money, so you work harder. Because work is stressful, you reward yourself by spending. Because you spend too much, you become even more afraid of not having enough money, so you work harder again. And around it goes. That cycle is so common, it almost feels invisible. People call it life, but often it's just emotional spending dressed up as adulthood. And if you really want to grow financially, you have to learn to catch yourself in that pattern. You have to notice when you're buying relief instead of value, when you're upgrading because you're bored, when you're financing an identity, when your purchases are less about utility and more about proving something to yourself or other people. This is where behavioral economics and personal finance collide. A lot of financial struggle is not math first. It's psychology first. People know what they should do. Spend less than they earn. Avoid bad debt. Build an emergency fund. Invest consistently. But knowledge alone doesn't create behavior. Emotion often overrides logic. That's why someone can understand money and still sabotage themselves. Fear says, play it safe forever. Desire says, you deserve this right now. And both can destroy your future if you never question them. Now, to be fair, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not above criticism. Some people argue the book oversimplifies wealth. Others say it puts too much emphasis on assets and investing without fully acknowledging how different people's starting points really are. And that criticism matters, because real life is complicated. Not everyone has spare cash to invest. Not everyone has family support, time flexibility, access to education, or margin for risk. Not every investment works. Not every side hustle becomes a business. Not everybody who buys an asset becomes financially free. And yes, blindly chasing passive income can lead people straight into scams, overpriced courses, speculative investments, and financial traps disguised as opportunity. So no, this book is not a magic map. It is not a guaranteed blueprint. It does not erase structural realities. It does not mean if you just think rich, money will appear. But even with all of those limitations, the book still has enormous value. Because its greatest gift is not that it tells you how to get rich overnight. Its greatest gift is that it forces you to ask better financial questions. From childhood, most people are trained to become good employees, reliable, productive, obedient, responsible. And there is dignity in that. But very few people are taught how to become the manager of their own financial life. Very few people are taught how to read a personal balance sheet, how to think in terms of cash flow, how to evaluate whether a purchase creates freedom or dependency, how to distinguish income from wealth, how to tell the difference between looking rich and being rich. And that distinction is massive. Looking rich is easy. A financed luxury car can make you look rich. A big mortgage can make you look successful. A lifestyle funded by debt can look impressive on social media. But being rich, or at least becoming financially resilient, is different. It's having options. It's having breathing room. It's having assets that reduce your dependence on panic. It's being less fragile when something goes wrong. That's why, after reading this book, you may not become rich immediately, but you might start changing the way you spend. You might stop automatically upgrading every time your income rises. You might start learning about index funds, retirement accounts, business models, taxes, and ownership. You might begin asking whether your current financial life is making you freer or making you more trapped. And those questions matter because financial freedom is often misunderstood. Financial freedom does not mean never working again. For most people, it means having the power to choose your work. It does not mean owning a giant pile of money for the sake of money. It means not being fully controlled by money. It does not mean overnight success. It means steadily building assets, skills, and judgment so your future becomes less dependent on survival mode. So if I had to boil Rich Dad, Poor Dad down to its deepest message, it would be this: don't just play the money game. Learn the rules of the game. Because if you never learn the rules, you can spend your whole life doing what looks responsible, what sounds normal, what everyone around you is doing, and still end up financially anxious, dependent, and exhausted. But once you understand the rules, even if you start small, you begin to move differently. You stop worshiping income and start paying attention to cash flow. You stop confusing consumption with wealth. You stop treating every raise like permission to spend more. You stop asking only, "What does this cost me today?" and start asking, "What will this cost me over the next 5 years?" You start building with intention. Maybe that means paying off high-interest debt. Maybe it means saving your first $1,000 emergency buffer, then building toward 3 to 6 months of expenses. Maybe it means contributing regularly to a 401k, a Roth IRA, or low-cost index funds. Maybe it means learning a skill that increases your earning power. Maybe it means creating a small second income stream. Maybe it means buying fewer status symbols and more time. The form can vary. But the direction is the point. And here are the 3 questions this book quietly leaves all of us with. When you work hard every day, are you building assets or just paying bills? When you buy something, does it make you more free or more financially anxious? And is your current income structure becoming more secure over time or more fragile? Those are not abstract questions. Those are life questions. Because if your entire life depends on one paycheck, one employer, one good month, one uninterrupted routine, then even if you look stable, you may be more vulnerable than you think. And if your expenses rise every time your income rises, then your success may be feeding the very pressure you're trying to escape. That's why the goal is not to become obsessed with money. The goal is to become less controlled by it, to stop living in reaction, to stop making financial decisions out of fear, ego, or impulse, to stop building a lifestyle that requires constant maintenance just to feel okay, and to start building a life where money becomes a tool instead of a source of quiet panic. So in the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not really telling you to quit your job and gamble on entrepreneurship. It's not saying every asset is good or every liability is bad in every situation. And it's definitely not promising easy wealth. What it is saying is much more useful. Don't stay financially asleep. Don't spend your entire life earning money without learning how money works. Don't mistake income for wealth. Don't mistake appearances for security. And don't assume the path everyone accepts is automatically the path that leads to freedom. Because the most powerful shift may not be in your salary. It may be in your awareness. And once that awareness changes, your habits can change, your questions can change, your decisions can change. And over time, your life can change. So let me leave you with the same challenge this book leaves behind. If you had to choose, which kind of life would you want? Life A, a stable career, dependable income, and a future built mostly on wages. Or life B, more uncertainty up front, a commitment to learning financial intelligence, building assets, and eventually making money work for you. Which one would you choose? And maybe the real answer is not choosing one extreme or the other. Maybe the smartest move is to start with the stability of A while deliberately building toward the freedom of B. Because that might be the most realistic path of all. Not fantasy, not hype, not overnight riches, just a smarter game. And finally, that's the point. The people who win financially are not always the people who work the hardest. They're often the people who understand the game more clearly. So before you chase more money, make sure you've learned the rules. Because earning more without financial intelligence can keep you trapped. But even a modest income, directed with clarity, can become the foundation for real freedom.